Hello, stop our music here. Hello, everybody, and actually, I'll leave that on for a second. I like it. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Lehigh Valley Passport to History's monthly virtual program. I am your host for this evening, George Wacker, Lehigh Valley with Love Media. I want to tell you a little bit about the series first before we bring our guests in. This series airs live on third Tuesdays at 6:30 p.m. on the Lehigh Valley Passport to History Facebook page and other social medias. It is also available after the show if you caught it in the middle or you want to watch other episodes. And before we get to our guests, again, a little bit of background on Lehigh Valley Passport to History. You're looking at the website right now. It is a partnership of 50 historic sites and resources in and around Pennsylvania's Lehigh and Northampton counties. The group helps to promote local tourism and shares historical activities, events, tours, and exhibitions throughout the valley. Lehigh Valley Passport to History is funded in part with funding received through the County of Northampton's Hotel Tax Program, the Lehigh County Tourism Development Grant Program, and the Institute of Museum and Library Services. Of course, visit lvhistory.org for more information. And this evening, we are focusing on Black history during Black History Month. I want to invite on our guests, Marin Singer, who is the president of Longswamp Township Historical Society, and Claudia Volpe, the director of Petrucci Family Foundation, speaking on behalf of the Northampton County Historical and Genealogical Society and the Siegel Museum. Welcome. Yay. Thank you guys so much for being a part of it. I love this music feature. It's a shame to turn it off, but thank you guys so much for joining us this evening. I wanted to make sure before we got into Marie's presentation, I wanted you to both have an opportunity to tell everybody a little bit about your organizations, and then we're going to go through presentations one by one. So, Marie, if you don't mind just giving us a little bit of a background on the Longswamp Township Historical Society.
Absolutely. Let me just start by saying where Longswamp Township is, because it sounds kind of like a comic book place, but it's real. We're located in southeastern part of Berks County. We border Lehigh County at the municipalities of Albertus and Brannocksville. And our Berks neighbors include the borough of Topton, which was once a village of the township, and the townships of Hereford and District. Okay. We have been active, providing active service to the Longswamp area since May of 2011, which pretty much coincided with the 250th anniversary of the township's founding. Over those 10 plus years, we've been very active. We've hosted 90 programs and events on a wide variety of topics, but mostly topics that have something to do with the history of the area. We currently operate a museum in rented space while we continue to raise funds to restore and adaptively repurpose. What you're seeing there on the screen is a 19th century train station that we acquired in 2019. And if you'd like to learn more about the project, all you have to do is go right to that page and click Learn More.
Well, that was a perfect introduction. Thank you so much. And we're going to see your presentation in just a moment. But I want to bring Claudia on to talk a little bit about the Petrucci Family Foundation. I'm going to bring up the website here. We're going to talk about the exhibit more when you speak to that in a little bit. But could you tell people who aren't familiar about the Family Foundation?
Of course. So first of all, thank you so much to the Lehigh Valley with Love and Lehigh Valley Passport to History for having me on tonight. I'm really glad to be able to share a little bit about both the organization and the exhibition that I worked on with the Siegel Museum. So as George mentioned, my name is Claudia Volpe. I am the director of the Petrucci Family Foundation, and I primarily oversee our collection of African-American art. The collection consists of about 450 art objects, and they range in material, subject matter, and style. Likewise, we aim to represent a range of artists in the collection as well. So we include not only artists from the canon, but also making sure that we're representing those who are emerging, well-established, and artists who were never really given the appropriate amount of time in the spotlight that they deserved. We've been fortunate to exhibit works from the collection nationally. So our artwork has traveled to the Portland Art Museum, the Wadsworth Atheneum in Connecticut, bridge projects in California, the University of Mary Washington in Virginia, just to name a few. So it's really a treat when we get to partner with local institutions like the Sigel Museum to develop an exhibition in our backyard. So having said that, since our work doesn't have a direct local lens for this discussion series centered on the Lehigh Valley history, I thought it would be really engaging and relevant for me to share an overview of the exhibition at the Sigel Museum and spotlight a handful of artworks that are included in it. So we'll get to that in a little bit.
Yeah, we have those all queued up and we're looking forward to it. Claudia, thank you. And again, thank you so much for joining us. And Marie, we're all set to bring in, I'm going to get everything queued up here, your presentation. And again, this is going to be a little bit truncated just for time. So we might be, going through here at a different pace, but I'm going to open it up to you and I'm going to direct, you direct me and let's start.
Right. Okay. Well, today, what I'm going to bring to you is what I hope you'll find, or I find at least, an intriguing mystery that combines some physical evidence, local lore, documented history, and just some good old-fashioned speculation, all of which tie together to suggest that there was a line of the Underground Railroad that existed here in the township. I don't know whether you think it's appropriate, because it is Black History Month, to just talk a tiny bit about the railroad. Okay. Okay, you can stop right there. That's just something for you to look at. The train station I talked about is in the lower right of this slide. So the railroad wasn't really a railroad. It was just a system of people, both Black and whites, working together. They used railroad technology because they thought it would be good code. So a conductor was somebody who oversaw stopovers or routes, and depots and stations were safe houses. So that's how
we're talking about the Underground Railroad.
That's correct. That's correct. They used railroad jargon, and that's how it got the name Underground Railroad. So anyway, I think we can move to the next slide for sure, just for something else to look at. Nope, not yet. Okay. So the other thing is in Pennsylvania, this was news to me. I did some research, and there was at least one Underground Railroad stopover in every county in Pennsylvania, and at least 11 sites that are known to have existed in Berks County. So it was an active area. You think about safe houses, places where enslaved people who were fleeing to safety would have spent their days, and they would travel at night. So, places like private homes or churches, that seems like the obvious kinds of places. But actually, iron ore furnace plantations were common stopovers. And when you think about it, it makes a lot of sense. Based on 1790s census data, iron masters were the largest slaveholders in counties where furnaces existed in Pennsylvania. Iron masters used Black slaves. They used indentured people, both Blacks and whites. And then later on, it was primarily Black freedmen, and then also still white indentured servants. So some of these Black workers would have had families. And so for enslaved people to come there to rest and hide out, sort of, they blended right in. And so it was the perfect setting for them, or stopover for them. So my story centers on 3 generations of iron masters that lived and worked in Longswamp Township. Can you just go back one slide, please?
Absolutely.
Okay, so these are the 3 sites I'm going to touch on. This is one of the villages, a part of one of the villages in the township. And these sites are located less than a half mile from each other. Okay, so very close. So what I'm going to talk about first is the circle at top, the Longswamp Bed and Breakfast, and then you can go to the next slide.
Okay. Now?
Next one, please. There we go. Okay. So let me get to my notes here. Okay. So today this is a Longswamp Bed and Breakfast, but it was once the former home of Horatio Trexler and then later William Trexler. They were brothers. Their father, Reuben, became the iron master of the furnace here in the township. and having taken over his father-in-law's business around 1818. So if you look at the photo on the right, that's the back of the house. So that small addition was actually the original Trexler home. And we believe that it was Horatio, one of Reuben's sons, that built the big, beautiful thing that you see on the left, in front of it. Okay. So why I'm telling you about this house is because of what's underneath it. From the cellar, there was built a tunnel, which I was actually in it. I saw it with my own eyes. Of course, I was too stupid to have a camera with me, and I didn't have another chance to go down there. It was a one-shot deal, and I blew it. But it only ran for about 8 feet or so. It wasn't like just dirt. It was actually, constructed very well. But then it was intentionally sealed off, and the notes that the inn master had indicated that tunnel continued in the direction of the red arrow over to the building kind of next door, if you want to say, which served as a general store and a post office, and was also owned by the Trexler family. Okay. I said this is also going to be about lore. I'll just throw this in. So William, the youngest son, well, not the second youngest son, who took over the house after his brother Horatio moved to Reading, his second wife was supposedly sympathetic to the plight of the enslaved people that were escaping from the South. And William moved into that house sometime after 1848. Okay, so let's see what the next slide is.
Okay.
That's good. Okay, so now we're going to move across the street, a little catty cornered across the street. All right. The house on the bottom right, that was the ironmaster's mansion that was built in the late 1700s for Jacob Lesher, who had that furnace built. And then when Jacob retired and moved away, then Reuben Trexler moved in there. He was now the ironmaster. Okay, so today, that house is still there, but if you were going to travel past it and go kind of up the hill toward Bear Mountain, the ski resort, on the right, there are multiple outbuildings and some barns. Okay, those are newer barns. The barn you see on the left, in the late 1970s, it was on that land. At the time, it was part of the Rohrbach farm. So the Rohrbachs lived on that land. That was part of the mansion property. That barn burnt. And while they were digging all this junk out that you see there, they came upon an archway that led to a tunnel that, according to a family member, went down under the road, across the street, and to a house on the other side of the road. Okay. So now we've got 2 tunnels, and let's see what the next slide looks like.
Sure.
Okay. You see now, between the first and the second circle, we were just at the second circle. I have taken the liberty of putting those red lines in there. I can't say that the tunnel took that direction. It's collapsed now. Okay, and
Can I ask a question?
Yes, sir.
So, what is what would the specific purpose of that tunnel be? Is it allowing them to disperse from transportation somehow and then get into a house and have safety for a while?
I believe that was it, that during the day they may have moved from one location to the other to get themselves closer to the iron furnace. It's all speculation. And like I say, we've been told the tunnel is there, it's collapsed. We have never brought in anyone to do any, underground radar or all those things that they can do to validate any of this. It's really just, here's some evidence we have, and let's just put 2 and 2 together, and maybe it adds up to 4. But it does make for a really interesting story. We don't know when the tunnel collapsed. I don't know that anybody knows that. But the mystery to me is, who dug those tunnels and why? Was it truly the Underground Railroad? We don't have a lot of information. This family played their cards very close to their chest. They didn't look at the things that they were doing, which looking back now were pretty amazing. They didn't think of it that someday this would be history, and they ought to be more careful about records and making sure that they were in places where they could be used by future generations.
Well, they were probably focusing on not leaving any trace at that time, right?
Perhaps, and
Right.
that's perhaps it, But it's like, well, so why would they have dug this and when? Because by around 1840, which was when Horatio would have still been in the house, the now bed and breakfast, any blacks that were coming into the furnace to work were free men, because of the gradual Abolition Act that was put in place in Pennsylvania. So were they doing this? There's also a lot of researchers that believe or know that some ironmasters were really abolitionists, even though they engaged black slaves because they represented cheap labor. They were, they took the side of trying to help folks to safety, and then use their facilities to help move them along to the different routes, as they were heading north and largely into Canada, but they went other places as well.
Okay.
So, like I say, my guess is, I think Jacob left the area too early. So I'm thinking we've got Reuben living on one side of the street with the barn property on his property, and we have his son living on the other side of the street.
Mhm.
So it seems to me that it makes sense that the Trexlers would have been the one to do all of this work. And I don't think it was benefiting them financially. I think it was, I'd like to think it was just altruism, and that they just really wanted to be part of helping these people get to safety. So that's what I got. I mean, I will have to just, leave it all up to you to decide, to draw conclusions from what's there. And I'm really hopeful that someday we will be able to, explore this further and get some folks in here who know what to look for, and see what we have.
Yeah, I want to be sure to get Claudia on here to do hers as well. But I have one question: is it something where there's ongoing? Are you continuing? Are there people continuing to do that? I think you just answered that you're hoping that there were more people to come in, maybe to excavate or
right. Well, with all of these things, I'm assuming comes money, and right now we're just focused on getting through the capital campaign. But I mean, it's definitely something. It's a very worthy project, and I'm sure we could, interest folks very easily. It's just having the bandwidth to do it. It's on the list. It's on my list anyway.
Well,
so anyway,
hold that thought.
Yes.
Yeah, hold that thought, because we're going to bring Claudia on. I'm going to mute you, Marie. Don't mind. Sorry. I want to make sure we bring Claudia on, give her time, and then we're going to have Marie come back in to plug everything at the end. So here we go. Claudia, hello. Thank you again so much. I'm excited to go through these works of art with you, but I do want to start, directly with this exhibit. And could you speak more about it? And then when you're ready for me to bring in some of the pieces, just let me know, and I'll let you go.
Sure thing. Yeah, thank you, George. So the exhibition is titled Another American's Autobiography, and the concept behind it was developed over the course of 2020 and 2021, which, as many of us are sensitive to, was an era that was marked by national polarization, civil unrest, and a reckoning with historic injustices across the country. And I found increasingly over the course of those years, I saw the national dialogue often painting anyone who protested in demand for racial justice and equality as unpatriotic and at times un-American. And it got me wondering, what does it mean to be patriotic? Who comes to mind when we think of an American patriot? And can we redefine and reimagine our symbols of patriotism or our expressions of allegiance? So over time, I developed an exhibition with the Sigel Museum that surveys work by Black artists who have grappled with questions of American identity, allegiance, and belonging in their practice. I selected artworks, there are about 30 of them in the show, that not only aim to affirm the role of Black Americans in shaping our national identity, but also that elevate civic engagement and constructive patriotism as a valid and healthy expression of a love of country. And so, George, you can start by pulling in the piece by Faith Ringgold. So as I mentioned, I'm just going to breeze through a couple of artworks that are featured in this exhibition that highlight some of those ideas that I brought up earlier. So this piece by Faith Ringgold is part of a print portfolio titled The Declaration of Freedom and Independence. And that portfolio was done in partnership with Raven Fine Art Editions, which is based on College Hill in Easton. And in it, she created a series of diptychs that addressed the grievances of the Declaration of Independence. This particular piece is called Taxes on Us Without Our Consent. And we can see on the left panel is an image of the Boston Tea Party. And on the right-hand side is a scene from Bloody Sunday, which we all know was a peaceful march in Selma, Alabama that was met with disproportionate police violence. And so this piece, in combination with other works from the series, underscores the hypocrisy of an American document that we hold sacred. And it forces the viewers to consider who gets to enjoy the freedoms that this country was founded to protect. George, can we go to the next slide? So there are 3 stills that we're going to have shared here from a short film by Kambui Olajimi. It's titled In Plain Sight, and in it, a Black couple dances barefoot on a wooden stage to Marvin Gaye's 1984 rendition of the national anthem. It's worth noting that he was one of very few Black artists at the time who had created his own iteration, I should say, of the national anthem. And so in 1984, when he performed it at the NBA playoffs, he received death threats for it. And so this is an interesting piece that was done in 2016 when Colin Kaepernick started kneeling for the national anthem. And it forces us to kind of reconsider American allegiance and asks us to envision Black joy in the delineation of Black bodies and the American experience. So a stark juxtaposition to what we were seeing in the national conversation at the time. You can move on to the Elizabeth Catlett piece. So Elizabeth Catlett was a Mexican-American artist. She was also an activist. In the 1950s, she went down to Mexico to, excuse me if I butcher the pronunciation, Taller de Gráfica Popular, and it was a Mexican printmaking workshop. And some of the artists that she worked with included Diego Rivera, who many of you may know was the husband of Frida Kahlo. And because of her activism and her associations with a handful of artists who had communist affiliations, Elizabeth Catlett was barred from re-entering the United States by the FBI until she was in her mid to late 80s. And so I wanted to bring this piece into today's discussion to not only consider the artist's story and questions of citizenship, but also because of the subject matter of this piece. You know, a small nod to Marie's amazing story about the potential of the Underground Railroad. But here we see a depiction of Harriet Tubman, who's often called General Moses, and she's seen leading Black families to freedom across the Underground Railroad. And when we consider American patriotism and our collective identity, one of the questions we also have to ask ourselves is, who do we valorize in history? Whose stories do we tell? And who gets to be seen as a patriot for the greater good of this country? We can move on to Sean Kimber's quote. And so Sean Kimber is an African-American artist, mathematician, and quote maker. She was formerly head of the math department at Lafayette College, but now she is the dean of college at Washington Lee University. Kimber comes from a family of cotton farmers and quilters in Alabama. Cotton was central to the lives of women in her family. They went from picking to ginning to sewing, with quilting emerging as the main mode of self-expression that was available to them. And so in this particular piece, this is an improvisational quilt for Sean. And you can see that at the bottom, it says, "In essence, I'm a sophisticated cotton picker," which is a quote that she borrows from Eartha Kitt's memoir. At this particular moment, I do want to plug that Sean Kimber will be giving a more comprehensive presentation with the Sigel Museum on Thursday, February 24th. And the information for that is available on their website. We can go on to the next piece. And this is a really large-scale artwork by the artist Dr. Iman Nseime. He's a scholar of African diaspora art, and he's also a practicing and exhibiting studio artist. He currently teaches art and art history at Westfield State University in Massachusetts. So this particular piece comes from his Benediction series, in which he envisions a story where God affixes his angels to the skin of Black men and casts them to earth to bear witness to the trials and tribulations of Black men in America. There's an accompanying poem that is posted on our website if you'd like to read it. It's really powerful work. And then finally, we'll close this with a piece by Marin Singer. So Marin Singer is an artist who's based out of California. She works primarily with non-precious materials, things that are immediately recognizable, like plastic bags, or in this case, New York Times newspapers. She does a lot of pieces in collaboration with her audience. And this particular one, she took New York Times newspapers, tore individual strips repeatedly, created these little bundles of newspaper strips that are then affixed directly to the wall to create a larger sphere. So I think this measures 72 inches in diameter. It's huge. And it's called Our Lives. And I think what's really interesting about it is it forces you to consider the production of the piece itself. You know, as she's tearing the newspaper, as she's twisting together these bundles, she's wringing her hands over the daily headlines and over our collective anxieties of our experiences in this country and in the world at large. And so in a way, especially when she's doing this in collaboration with other people, she's calling into direct attention what it is that connects us all. And that is essentially kind of the larger aim of this exhibition, to make the trials and tribulations and overall American experience more personal and integral to our experience collectively in this country. So I do give tours of the exhibition. I encourage you all to reach out if that's something that you'd be interested in doing, and I'd be delighted to walk you through the space.
Thank you so much. That was a fantastic. I don't want to speak out of turn. I believe I've seen at the Allentown Art Museum one of this artist's works in the last 2 years or so.
It was this piece, yeah.
Was it? Yeah, okay. Because I remember, I got up close to it. It was just amazing, the level of, you're looking at it like what must have went into, creating it. It was amazing to see that in person. You're right. It is huge. So it's definitely huge. Something that takes you back.
Yeah.
I want to be sure, and I have your current and upcoming exhibitions here already ready to go. Now is the part of a show where we are able to say, what is going on. We talked about the exhibition, which is on here as well, but I didn't know if you wanted to also take the opportunity. Are there any other current or upcoming exhibitions that you would like people to know about?
I would say there are several that are within driving distance. The other one that's currently up right now is at the University of Mary Washington, and that's about an hour outside of DC, if anyone should find themselves in that area. It was curated by a cohort of students, faculty, and staff. I essentially provided them a framework around healing, and they took that and ran with it. And they ended up creating a tremendous exhibition titled Healing Through the Preservation of Our Histories and Ourselves. And so that should be up through March 24th, if that's of interest to anyone. And then we do also have a traveling exhibition with the Smithsonian Institution, and that was what you saw down below. And that's, thank you, a retrospective of Robert Blackburn's works from the print workshop.
Okay. Maria, I had you muted there, and can you also, I think you were just starting to talk about your capital campaign before I cut you off. So now I want you to tell everybody about it and how we can help out.
We're looking to restore this building as a 19th century station. It served initially the East Pennsylvania Railroad, which was built in the mid 1800s and connected Allentown and Reading. And by doing so, for the first time ever, there was a continuous runner rail from the port of New York to Harrisburg, which sounds puny today, but at the time it was a really big deal. And so it feels like it's one of the most important historic structures in our township. And so we're excited at the opportunity. We're about halfway or so through raising the funds we need. The other thing that I would say on one of the slides that I had, the story I told you tonight is something that we were able to cobble together in the process of putting together what we call our village series of booklets. I know that there is a picture in one of the slides that I gave you. It's further. Nope, we passed it. Next. There. Okay.
Got it.
So these are like magazines, like, the material, soft cover. Each one portrays a village in the township, and kind of get the historical essence of each of them, and then also the surrounding hamlets. And this is something that our team of volunteers did, spearheaded by one of our founding board members, Dr. Eloise Long. It deserves a shout out for what she's done. There's lots of people who have contributed, as well as community members giving their family photos and such. So it's like you say, it's a fun, easy format. But like I said, what we know now about that so-called Underground Railroad line, we have learned in the process of putting these booklets together and doing the research. So there also, you can learn more about those on our website if you have the interest in learning more about the area.
And I made sure to drop the links into the chat there. So
Perfect.
if people want to learn more about the Petrucci Family Foundation or Longswamp Historical Society, we have the information in there, so you guys can check it out. And I want to, again, thank you so much for your time. This is always wonderful for me because I get to learn so much. And I know that a lot of people at home, they were commenting and saying thank you. So I just want to say thank you again. This is great, educational. And thank you guys for allowing it to happen.
And thank you, George, for all your help with this. I appreciate it very much.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody watching at home. We appreciate it. And we'll see you next month.